I won't drag on before we get started, so let's harness the innate magic of dragons with 7 new spells from FIZBAN'S Treasury. Everyone gets new draconic spells, except for the paladin and the cleric. I guess dragons aren't too fond of them, but let's not waste any time grieving over it and jump right in with our first new spell, called NATHAIR'S Mischief, a 2nd level illusion spell for bard, sorcerer, and wizard. This concentration spell takes an action to cast and lasts for a minute as you create a 20-foot cube within 60 feet of you that fills with a combination of fey and draconic magic. To determine the effect of the spell, you'll roll in the Mischievous Surge table, which is much like the wild magic table, and you'll re-roll the effect at the start of each of your turns, while you may also move the cube up to 10 feet before you roll each time. Overall, the spell has a pretty fun flavor, and some of the effects are actually pretty good, like incapacitating every creature in the cube on a failed wisdom save until the start of your next turn, and forcing them to use all of their movement to move in a random direction, or blinding every creature within the cube until the start of your next turn on a failed dex save. The other 2 of the 4 possible options aren't quite as good, but they certainly have their uses, as you can charm creatures within the cube if they fail a wisdom save, or create difficult terrain within the cube, both until the start of your next turn, of course. However, it seems to me that many players will probably stay away from this option since it's hard to know exactly what you're getting in return for a 2nd level spell slot. But that said, I'd happily take this on a Fae-themed character in a one-shot for a little extra fun and wacky antics, or it could even be a fun effect to attach to a magic item or to give the party in the form of a scroll. Next, we have RIME'S Binding Ice, a 2nd level evocation spell for sorcerer and wizard, which projects a 30-foot cone of cold energy, whatever that is, that requires a Constitution saving throw against 3d8 cold damage and becoming trapped by ice, having the creature's speed reduced to 0 for a minute, or until it or another creature uses its action to break away the ice. On a success, they'll take half damage and aren't hindered by the ice, but I still feel that this is really great. Even though the ice is instantly broken with no ability check or save necessary, someone is going to have to burn an action to free them, and that in 5e is pretty valuable, especially if you manage to trap multiple enemies inside of your 30-foot cone of ice. Having melee attackers trapped and taking damage from your ranged attacks can be a great strategy, and the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot above 2nd level, keeping this pretty viable in late game, even if Constitution saving throws aren't exactly the best. Trust me, I know how you all feel about Constitution saving throws. So for the next spell, let's touch on Ashardalon Stride, a 3rd level transmutation spell for Ranger, Sorcerer, Wizard, and Artificer that doesn't require saving throws from your targets. This 1-minute long concentration spell does a lot of really cool things for just a single bonus action. To start, flames burst out from your feet and allow you to zoom around with an extra 20 feet of movement that doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. What's more, each creature or object you move within 5 feet of will take 1d6 fire damage from those flames. Though a creature only takes that damage once per turn, and it's only a single d6, there's no saving throw. It just happens. And we're effectively dealing damage with our movement here. But the spell gets even better at higher levels, wherein you gain an extra 5 feet of movement and an additional 1d6 of fire damage for each level you upcast it. If you can keep your concentration up for multiple rounds, this spell is definitely well worth taking, especially if you're playing a dual-wielding ranger, blade-singing wizard, or some other build that likes to be up close to enemies. But don't take my word for it. Check out this one-shot we played where an artificer roasted an entire ship's worth of enemies and some of the party using this spell. Moving past the fire and flames, we come to RAULOTHIM'S Psychic Lance, a 4th level enchantment spell for bard, sorcerer, warlock, and wizard that targets a single creature that you can see within its 120-foot range with a shimmering lance of psychic energy emanating from your forehead as an action. On a failed intelligence saving throw, the target will take 7d6 psychic damage and will be incapacitated until the start of your next turn, with a success dealing half as much damage with no incapacitation. But that's not all. Alternatively, you can utter the creature's name when you cast the spell and remove the need to see that creature, so long as it's within range. This can make dealing with hidden or invisible enemies a lot easier, especially if your aim is to incapacitate them and possibly capture them alive, if they can live the 7d6 damage, that is. Now, while this spell does scale 1d6 in damage for each spell level above 4th, it probably isn't worth upcasting most of the time. The real benefit we see from it is that incapacitation effect and the possibility of landing the spell on a creature that we can't see, and that will keep it pretty viable in later tiers of play, even without using higher level spell slots. Now let's have a look at one of my new favorite conjuration spells, Summon Draconic Spirit, a 5th level spell for Druid, Sorcerer, and Wizard. Using this spell as an action, we can summon a Draconic Spirit for an hour within 60 feet of us. That spirit is a large dragon that resembles any form of the chromatic, gem, or metallic variety. It shares your initiative count and moves directly after you, obeying your verbal commands with no action required by you, and taking the dodge action if you don't issue a command on your turn. Pretty standard stuff for summon spells. Now, to start things off with its stat block, this thing has a whopping 19 AC at minimum as a result of 14 plus the level of the spell, and hit points equal to 50 plus 10 for each spell level above 5th. That's kinda tanky. It has 30 feet of regular movement and swim speed, but a whole 60-foot flying speed with chromatic and metallic versions getting resistance to acid, cold, fire, lightning, and poison damage, and gem versions getting resistance to force, necrotic, psychic, radiant, and thunder damage. Wow, that's a lot of resistances. They're also immune to being charmed, frightened, or poisoned, and they have blind sight out to 30 feet and dark vision out to 60. They'll speak any languages you do in addition to Draconic, so you'll have no issues communicating with them, and they'll use your proficiency bonus for any skill checks. Now, what's also great here is that you're able to choose one of the damage resistances that your Draconic Spirit has when you summon it, and give yourself that same resistance until the spell ends. This effect alone gives you a ton of value out of the spell, especially if you know what kind of creatures you'll be up against. But there's still a lot more here. Let's get into the damage this creature can dish out itself. As an action, you'll likely have it take a multi-attack, wherein the dragon makes a number of rend attacks equal to half the spell's level rounded down, followed up by its breath weapon. Now, while the rend attack only deals 1d6 plus 4 plus the spell's level in piercing damage using your spell attack modifier to hit, it's important to remember that there will be at least 2 of these attacks on an enemy every turn that your Draconic Spirit is still up, and that exists outside of your own action economy. Combine that with a 30-foot cone breath weapon every turn for a potential 2d6 of any damage type it has resistance to against multiple creatures, and you have quite a hefty amount of combat power here as well. Make no mistake, this is probably the best spell on the list. Absolutely bonkers good. And if you're glad to have heard about it here, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks. But we've still got 2 more spells to go on as we move to FIZBAN'S Platinum Shield, a 6th level abjuration spell for Sorcerer and Wizard. It must be good if it's named after the guy who wrote the book, right? Using a bonus action, this concentration spell creates a field of silvery light that lasts for a minute within a range of 60 feet, giving you or another creature within that range half cover for a +2 to AC and Dex saves, damage resistance to acid, cold, fire, lightning, and poison damage, and evasion, which says that when succeeding a Dex save that would have the creature take half damage, it takes no damage instead and only half damage if it fails. Although a 6th level slot is pretty expensive, as long as you can maintain concentration, you can use your bonus action to move this protective field from one creature to another within 60 feet of the current position of the field. The material components do also require a platinum plated dragon scale worth at least 500 gold pieces, but this can definitely be a good defensive option for any barbarians, fighters, monks, or other melee fighters in your party. I'm sure they'll thank you for it. Although I do find it a little odd that the clerics and paladins didn't at least get access to this one. It seems right up their alley, but dragons don't like them, so oh well. And at the end of our list, we have the spell you've all been waiting for, Draconic Transformation. Though probably not exactly what you'd expect from its name, this 7th level transmutation spell for Sorcerer, Wizard, and Druid allows you to transform aspects of yourself to take on a more draconic nature as a bonus action. These effects last for a minute and do require concentration, but I'd say it's all well worth it. First of all, we'll get Blind Sight, which notably hasn't been directly granted by a spell before now. Then we'll get a breath weapon that hits a massive 60-foot cone when we cast the spell, and as a bonus action on subsequent turns for 68 force damage on a failed dex save and half as much on a success. And last, we'll grow wings, giving us a whopping 60-foot flying speed. We get a lot here, as you might expect of the most powerful spell in this book, but some of you might not be thrilled about only 68 damage on that breath weapon. Listen, that 68 is force damage, so it's unlikely to be resisted, and it's spread over a huge area. So you're likely to catch at least several enemies each attack as a bonus action, and it doesn't count as a spell on subsequent turns. So you're dealing 68, or at least 3d8, to a bunch of enemies every turn as a bonus action, and then casting another spell to follow it up. That's really, really good. And if you're worried about your concentration, you can just fly in and out of range of most things with your 60 feet of movement speed every turn. I mean, really, who wouldn't want to become a dragon? And if you're still not satisfied with all these fantastic new draconic abilities, you may want to try pairing some of this with the new draconic feats from this same book. And if you found any of this helpful, feel free to fly down, like the video, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our other content down the road. So, until next time, go out there and make some chaos.